Hello there.
I'm Matt.
I'm Ben.
I'm a sound designer and audio engineer.
I am a designer and animator.
And we're here to talk about Star Wars.
Yes,
Television.
we are.
To
Star
be
Wars
specific.
television, yeah. This is the Holonet, episode 3. We're going to talk everything Star Wars TV, all of the new shows coming out, and this kind of new era of Star Wars media post the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. The new horizon on our binary sun
Yeah.
planet.
A new age of Star Wars. I'm really excited. I mean, obviously, The Mandalorian has been absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
Dave Filoni and company, who, a little backstory, I guess, on Dave Filoni, he was kind of the reason all of this exists right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was originally an artist on King of the Hill, funnily enough, back in the early 2000s,
Wow, I forgot
right?
about that. Yeah.
He worked on King of the Hill and was just a tried and true Star Wars nerd.
Yeah.
And caught the ear of George Lucas at some point, who took him under his wing a little bit, and is almost an apprentice of Star Wars, and kind of came to form with the Clone Wars series, which he led for, I think, the majority of its run, if not it entirely. And that just kind of changed the landscape of Star Wars. That was in the middle of, I guess, the sequel trilogies, and a little bit prior to that, that's where that show existed, and Star Wars Rebels after that. And now, we're into live action with The Mandalorian and Boba Fett and so many shows. But Mandalorian seems like a natural place to start.
Absolutely. I feel like Mandalorian has been the catalyst for this entire new age of Star Wars media, television specifically, but the universe in general. I remember a few years ago watching The Mandalorian for the first time with my wife and being honestly blown away. Like, as a Star Wars nerd, I was excited about it. I was stoked for it.
Yeah.
On a lower key than makes any sense to me now.
Yeah.
Star Wars TV, it was like, oh, wow, that's going to be the first...
It's the first television.
Real television live action show that we've seen, and wow, it blew me away.
Unbelievable. I mean, it was, I think, a perfect combination of Dave Filoni, who is the guy to kind of spearhead this new age of Star Wars properties, because he just knows and respects the world so much. And then Jon Favreau, great director, obviously kicked off the MCU with Iron Man 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Really ushered in that kind of whole cinema franchise, in addition to Kevin Feige, and so he was just a great director for the project. And in smaller details, like Greg Fraser, who was the director of photography on the first few episodes of The Mandalorian, and he just won an Academy Award for Dune, and just did the Batman cinematography. Like, he is kind of the hottest name in cinematography right now, and he did The Mandalorian, and you can tell when you watch those first. It's specifically the first episode. It screams kind of his look, and God, they were done so well.
And they did such a great job talking about the cinematography and The Mandalorian. They did such a great job with somebody as a musician's background.
Yeah.
You always come up with your own style, and your own style as a reference to the things that you grew up with. I mean, like John Mayer, for instance, is a huge guitar person, a hero of mine, and he grew up with Stevie Ray Vaughan, and you could hear that in him. But it's The Mandalorian shows the same influences that influenced George Lucas. It's the old westerns, the spaghetti westerns, the Shogun samurai films. It's all of those kind of distilled and brought into the modern era, as if George Lucas was making it with those references now.
Yeah.
And it boggles the mind to me just how well they were able to capture what he was going for back then.
It feels,
right now.
I think that honestly might be the thing that The Mandalorian did for the Star Wars community at large, especially after the divisiveness of the sequel trilogy, the Mandalorian felt like it was the most true extension of the original trilogy that has ever been, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it was really kind
Yeah.
of ripped from, George Lucas's consciousness, and I think a lot of that credit is due to Dave Filoni for understanding Star Wars so deeply and making a show that embodied that and all of those original inspirations that were, Lucas's inspirations.
Absolutely.
From a musical perspective, we have to talk about Ludwig Göransson, who, one of the amazing. We talked about this in our first episode about A New
Yeah.
Hope, but I think that what George Lucas did best was bring together the most talented people in the industry that took the project seriously back in 1977.
Yeah.
And that's why Star Wars still, that original trilogy still stands so tall, because the craftsmanship and every level behind it was so great. And The Mandalorian is the exact same.
Absolutely. I
Ludwig
mean,
wow.
if you think about practical effects, the first name on your tongue is going to be Industrial Light and Magic.
Right.
If you think about sound design, especially for me, the tip top of the world is Skywalker sound.
Yeah, Ben Bird.
And so many things born from this vision, born from this common past, is wild.
And John Williams obviously doing such an amazing job, and Ludwig just brought such an interesting. I mean, obviously you're the sound guy, but just from my kind of outside perspective, obviously he had done work on Black Panther and some really notable projects before.
Absolutely,
his
he
work
did
on
the music
Mandalorian.
for Childish Gambino's Redbone.
That's right. That's
I mean,
right.
This man
Normal
is
kind of
culturally very important for
Right.
a man in his 20s.
But he brought such. I think the thing about Star Wars, like the scores from the original trilogy, and even the prequels, amazing. John Williams is an absolute genius. They're very kind of traditional adventure scores, right? They're classical instruments, and I think what Ludwig did that was
And
really
they're slightly derivative of Holst the Planets.
Yeah, they have clear inspirations, and they're amazing, but they play with safe instruments, And I think like some interesting things that John Williams did was the orchestra and the Duel of Fates, right? That really stands out. I think a more safe composer would have pulled the not the orchestra, but the chorus, the all of the chants. A safer composer might have pulled those out, but those were left in. But Ludwig kind of brought an otherworldly sound to Star Wars with those really interesting instruments that you weren't used to hearing. You know?
Well, you are. You just aren't used to hearing them in that context.
Yeah.
I mean, those were all recorders, plastic
Wow.
recorders.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Good night.
It's, and I mean, he uses a non-traditional instrument, the recorder, that all of us played terribly in elementary school.
Was it that same cheap plastic one, or was it a better kind
It was
of
a
nicer
set of recorders, but
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
it's cheap and plastic. He bought I think he said it was a $200 set from Amazon.
Wow. Good night.
And he's using it to reference the good old classic
Yeah.
with that
The whistle. Yeah.
It's a clear reference to spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
Wild.
Absolutely. I mean, so Mandalorian, amazing showrunner, and Dave Filoni with incredible behind the camera talent and post production talent. The other thing, in true Star Wars fashion, kind of revolutionized the way virtual production was done, because they had a real issue with Mandalorian in a lot of sense, in that they needed it to be as high quality as a film, but did not have, they don't have the budget on a show, even a show that's run by, Disney and Star Wars, to do live action, quality VFX and post production across 8 hours of content. It's just a whole. You take the budget of the VFX budget of a film might be $150 million. You can't 4x that. It's just it's impossible. So
let alone 8x, 10x, 12x. Yeah.
It just immediately blows it out of budget, and you have this Mandalorian character, this amazing bounty hunter who has a chrome helmet on, which is a nightmare for green screening and in reflections in general, right? So because the look of his outfit is going to be completely determined by the lighting in the scene, right? Because it's reflective, so that's an immediate problem. And yeah, in true fashion, they implemented a new technology that had never been used on this kind of production scale before, which was this massive 180-degree LED wall.
Yeah.
And what that allowed them to do with other technologies like I don't know if it was Unreal Engine specifically, but it was something similar to that, if not Unreal Engine, which allowed them to essentially build out like a video game level with cinema quality assets, 3D models with trillions of polygons that would never be used in a game, but Unreal or whatever platform they're using supported it, and they would project this environment onto the LED wall. And not only did that give them their background, no green screen, nothing to key out in post production, but it also gave lighting to the entire scene. So his
down
helmet,
to the reflections.
yeah, down to the reflections,
helmet.
and that means that they can really just shoot it in camera, and what they get is what they get. I don't know how many VFX shots are in each kind of episode of The Mandalorian, but they're much less than if they had used a traditional green or blue screen.
Now here's a question that I have for you. I don't know if you'll right off the bat know the answer. When I've been wondering about this, when they do these shots in this
Stage.
360 environment, when he walks across,
right?
Do they have to shoot it in sequence, or does the background move with him?
Yes.
Does it track him?
That is the beauty of the platform they're using. Again, it's either Unreal or something similar to it, because it is real-time rendering, right? Like if you were to do this in a traditional post-production sense, that camera would have to be virtually tracked after the fact, and whatever fake environment you put in behind that green screen would have to be moved to the physical camera that was there capturing the performance in real time. And there's a lot of work there. But what they can do is set up the real live action camera to give its positional data to a virtual camera that's in the game engine, so that the background naturally moves and parallaxes with the physical camera. So as the scene is going, that background is behaving as it should, and everything is parallaxing appropriately, which is just marvelous. And the other thing that a kind of real-time rendering allows you to do, they get the background in place on set one day, let's say, and there's a crate that's just in the way, and they're like, in this virtual environment, they're like, damn, that crate's in the way. That artist that's controlling that background can literally, controlling the scene, can just move the object. He's like, oh fuck, you don't want that crate right there? Let me just put it over here.
Yeah.
And it works. It's all rendering in real time. There's nothing to re-render. There's no light. I mean, it's a phenomenal technology that they've brought to the show that has really allowed them to pull off the level of visual fidelity we expect from Star Wars, but on a much more economical budget. So, classic Star Wars, just reinventing the way that stuff is shot, that productions are had.
It's never looked as good as this, and it's crazy to know that it's on a budget at the same time.
Exactly. And it's not the solution.
Forever pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely. It's not the solution to everything. I think they probably still they'll do some green screen work, because I'd say the only limitation to this technology is that whatever they're filming has to take place in this, 50-foot kind of circle, right? It has to. So every now and then, and I have a bit more critical of an eye when I'm watching shows that I know were done with this technology. I always kind of look for the edges of the seam between the real life props and sets, and then where this virtual stage starts. Sometimes you can see it, but by and large, you would never know. And I distinctly remember feeling in that first episode of The Mandalorian, how does this look so good? You can always tell when something is in camera versus post-production, right? It could still look amazing, and if it's green screen or blue screen work, but you could just, particularly when it comes to lighting and reflections, you can just tell when it's real.
Yeah.
And by all intents and purposes, it's real. It's in camera when it's captured, and it looks amazing.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah.
So Mandalorian, bringing on the whole reveal of Grogu in I think it was the second episode, maybe, or perhaps the end of the first. I can't
Also,
remember.
Grogu, what a cultural icon.
I know. You knew when that character showed up how much Grogu merch was going to be plastered over Hot Topic in every fucking store.
Our viewers and listeners don't know this, but I have a son on the way, the first.
Yes.
And we have so much Grogu stuff in my house.
I bought you a Grogu onesie.
You did. And I don't have enough of it.
Yeah,
that's for sure. I will never stop buying
this
Grogu
poor child
merchandise.
is going to be in Star Wars merch his entire life, and I cannot wait.
My mom, I haven't told you this yet. My mom is sewing him a little pair of overalls that's R2-D2 themed, so it's gonna look like R2-D2.
That is adorable.
Yeah.
Man,
it's incredible.
That's so exciting. Yeah. Grogu, genius idea for a character.
Oh,
instantly kind of pulled in perhaps an audience into this show that might not have otherwise been there because they're there for the cute baby.
Yeah, but
the dynamic between Mandalorian and this kind of unspoken masculine character and this quiet silent type and this helpless child that it was such an interesting dynamic that they added to the show,
but also a clear reference back to westerns.
Yeah,
I mean, that's so many old westerns,
right?
True Grit, for example, about as western as you can get.
A gritty,
very similar.
Yeah. A gritty cowboy
premise.
to having to take care of, a younger person and
younger innocent child.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, for a character like Mandalorian who is set up as a traditional bounty hunter, he's apathetic. Will take you in cold or not, and he doesn't care, right? He's here for the money, and to be attached to a character like Grogu and you get to see the sympathetic side of him come out. It's a really genius move.
It is.
And it'll be exciting to see what they do with that now that we are headed into Mandalorian season 3.
Yep.
But that whole first season just, did an amazing job. Season 2 followed it up very, very well. They just finished about a couple months ago Boba Fett standalone series. People mixed in the Star Wars community about Boba Fett. I think there's a lot of love, but there's also a lot of hate, and I think that it had its issues, but there were good moments in that show.
I also have mixed feelings about the Book of Boba Fett. I overall absolutely loved it. There were some cheesy moments, as people are sure to point out. And a lot of people don't like the direction that his character went. They say, "Oh, well, that's not Boba Fett. Boba Fett was a killer. Boba Fett was ruthless." But
this was a story of growth, right?
We expected
to see him change, and I think that's great because the character of Boba Fett is kind of taken by the Mandalorian. I think they entered into a show where they had an issue where the traditional Boba Fett kind of character type was already occupied, and it's like, well, shit, what do we do now?
I think,
and they chose to make him more kind of respectful and all of that.
I think this is a time where in both the real, true modern world currently, as well as this time in Star Wars, there's a lot of personal growth. There's a lot of, why am I doing this? There's a lot of, what's actually best for me and the world around me. And I think the characters are beginning to reflect that.
Yeah.
I think it's, Boba Fett should have died
in the Sarlacc pit. Yeah. And it's funny, I don't know if you ever watched Parks and Recreation, but there is an episode where a character played by Patton Oswalt is in a town hall meeting run by Leslie Knope, the main character of that show, and he talks about he's trying to hold the floor or filibuster or something like that. And he goes into this rant about his idea for a follow-up story with Boba Fett crawling out of the Sarlacc pit. And it is, I kid you not, as fans were very keen to point out, shot for shot, what this sequence was. A great opening sequence to Boba Fett. Him being, waking up in the Sarlacc pit and escaping and crawling out. I was like, did they watch that and be like, I mean, obviously that was inevitably going to happen, but it was very close. And if it was a nod to Parks and Rec, what a great nod. I think Boba Fett, I think a lot of fans took issue with perhaps how quickly he was kind of growing, but maybe more so his almost inaction. He didn't do a whole lot in the series. He was kind of, I think, maybe more passive than fans were expecting.
Yeah. But he always was. He always has been. I mean, if you look at the original, now I'm not necessarily talking about Clone Wars Boba Fett. I mean, he's a child at that point.
Right.
But in movies and film, he's not really been the most quick to action. He's the strong, silent type that stands at the sides.
Boba Fett's interesting because he was never intended to be, a mainstay, right? The character design was workshopped by Ralph McQuarrie back in some original concept art for A New Hope, and I think it was for the original Stormtrooper design, and it ended up going with what they went with, the traditional Stormtrooper look, which is great, and they saved that look for Boba Fett in Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, and
they actually unveiled his character before the movie even came out
at a parade, and him and Vader are walking down, and people just latched on to this new masked character that they didn't know who his identity was, and great move on their part, and he just, of course, skyrocketed into kind of cult fame and became this character that everyone wanted to know more about. So I think maybe that's why it hurts for some fans, is they've been wanting to see more of Boba Fett for so long, and they just maybe felt that this show did not.
It's also
did not do it as well as they hoped.
Yeah, it's also kind of a danger of a character that's as little spoken as he is.
Yeah, they could go anywhere with
people. He meant such a great deal to so many people, and they assigned their own meaning to him. He didn't have that many lines. He wasn't really that present, but he meant a lot to a lot of people. And when you have that combination of things, he's going to mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
And they were bound to disappoint some people, but I think they did a good job of showing true character growth.
He's clearly very different at the end of it. I think maybe, I don't know. Robert Rodriguez, I believe, was the director for a large portion of Boba Fett, and I watched Spy Kids as a kid, but that's about all I know of his work. And it could have come down to that. It could have been an issue with direction. I think the standout episodes for a lot of people in that show were not about Boba Fett. They were continuation of where we left off in Mandalorian season 2, and they were incredible episodes. Episode 5, I believe, was the standalone Boba Fett or Mandalorian episode, and it was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, the daughter of the famous director and child star from the 50s, and she directed some episodes in Mandalorian season 1 and 2, and just did such a phenomenal job with that episode. I remember
she's a great director.
I knew it felt different when it opened up, and on the Halo ring kind of looking world, right? And I was like, oh, it felt, it was energizing. I think it was what the season needed. However, it feels perhaps a little unfair to put some kind of required watching for other characters like the Mandalorian into a show titled Boba Fett, in case someone might miss it, because you might get the Star Wars fan who is like, maybe they weren't huge on Boba Fett and they just decide to skip it.
That's fair.
And they're going to miss some really valuable stuff.
I know a person at work who was wanting to watch the Boba Fett with her partner, and her partner had not yet seen any of The Mandalorian, so she had to rewatch, or not rewatch, but she had to start all the way at the Mandalorian just to get
to Boba
to
Fett.
Book of Boba Fett.
And I'm okay with. I love the idea of the shows pulling from other characters in other shows and starting to build a kind of larger new roster of characters and see them cross paths. I think that's great. I just think maybe the show, if it had been just the one episode, perhaps it would have been received differently. But of course, the kind of we didn't see Boba Fett for 2 episodes, and I think that hurt the momentum of the show. But by and large, Star Wars TV is it's running so strong. On the other side of things, we also have the animated Bad Batch series, also done by Dave Filoni, who, again, started with Clone Wars and then Rebels, and those two shows really carried Star Wars fans. They added, the Clone Wars in particular, added so much depth to the prequel films that just wasn't there before, and so much character work, and especially with, Anakin and his relationship with, Padme and Obi-Wan and everybody, and so much great stuff there. And now we have the Bad Batch, and it's continuing the story of, a group of clones who are experimented on or were experimented on, and now they are a bit different from a regular clone, and they were not affected by Order 66, and they're having adventures of their own, and it's really good. It's great stuff. I mean, I love the fact that we can have animated Star Wars content in tandem with the live action stuff.
I think it's very, very well made. I just the characters weren't specifically for me. That's fine. I liked them in the original Clone Wars series, but I didn't need more of them.
Sure. They were in the last season of Clone Wars, season 7, which Clone Wars, obviously we're talking about kind of the state of current Star Wars television, but Clone Wars is current enough to where it was canceled, at the end of, I think, season 6, I believe, and which is tragic. I don't understand how Cartoon Network could cancel a show that was doing as well as that one, but they did. But fortunately, through Netflix, they were able to release that last season, and it had been a couple of years, and it was just amazing.
What a powerful finale!
Ooh, Maul and Ahsoka. That was just the fight everyone's been waiting for.
I get goosebumps thinking about the final scene of Vader standing at the
in front of the clone helmets,
the graveyard, the makeshift graveyard Ahsoka created, with all of their helmets painted with her facial markings on them.
He ignites her
I literally have
Shoto
goosebumps
lightsaber, and
thinking about it.
Yeah, it's an amazing shot, and again, I think it's just a testament to how well Dave Filoni understands not only the world and the lore, but the characters, right?
And the emotional attachments and motivations of them.
Right, because, of course, in the prequels, Anakin never had a Padawan. I don't think George ever intended him to, but, they found this time between episodes 2 and 3, and they were like, let's give him one, and let's create this new character, which has now become such a phenomenon in the Star Wars world.
We've talked off camera about the redemption of Anakin's character that Filoni was able to create. I mean, I personally was never a huge fan of Anakin's character in the prequel trilogy.
Many people weren't. That's not an uncommon opinion.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I'm one of those guys. I don't necessarily love the whiny protagonist.
Sure.
My wife's biggest fandom is Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and she hates Frodo.
I can't stand Frodo.
Yeah. I
mean,
it's a fair.
I
my
liken
sister's
them
the same way. She hates Frodo. Loves Bilbo. Hates Frodo. Anakin kind of got a similar treatment,
but even Frodo was a little bit less of a bitch than Anakin.
Yes. Yeah. I know it's tough, and I think that Hayden Christensen did a great job playing Anakin in episodes 2 and 3. Like, I think he's a good actor.
Oh, I think so.
I'm excited, which we will talk Obi-Wan, here soon.
Yeah.
Very excited to see him return as Darth Vader in that show. I think he deserves it, after kind of what went down with the prequels. But to your point, Dave Filoni, he took that character and really filled in the gaps and gave so much more personality to him in the time span of the Clone Wars.
I was a person that didn't care much for Anakin, and I didn't think I ever would. I just kind of had written him off as a character, but having watched the Clone Wars animated series, I have a real, true emotional connection to Anakin, and by extension, Darth Vader, and it completely changes everything when I rewatch the movies.
Prequels. It really does.
Well, the prequels and even the original trilogy. When I watch episodes 4, 5, and 6, and I see Darth Vader as I see him completely differently now, knowing
What
the
he's
Anakin that I
yeah.
now know, and it impacts me much more heavily than it ever would have previously, and
Yeah.
that's just the true measure of how incredible Filoni has
It really
been.
is. I think so many people took issue with how quickly he turned in episode 3. You know, it just felt so abrupt, right? And they
Yeah.
added so much more nuance to that in the Clone Wars, and you got to see him struggling throughout,
Hmm.
7 seasons, and having those moments where you're like, oh shit, this guy has issues. Like
Yeah.
he's jealous and he's temperamental and all of
Yeah.
these, which
All of these extremely human emotions, which
yeah,
I had previously attributed his turn just strictly to the almost puritanical rigidity of the Jedi Order,
right,
and then just the complexities that come
yeah.
out about Anakin in the Clone Wars series.
And Dave Filoni just keeps it rolling with Rebels, the follow up to the Clone Wars after it was
Hmm.
canceled.
Hmm.
And I think it ran for 4 or 5 seasons and introduced amazing characters. But still, with Anakin, you get amazing sequences between Darth Vader and Ahsoka. A fight in particular they have when the cast is looking for a Sith holocron, I believe, and it's great. I mean, seeing them reunite and seeing Ahsoka kind of hear of Vader and those reactions in that series, and then seeing that eventual conflict between the two of them was really really powerful. Just
Yeah.
goosebumps again, and that show also gave us a great scene between Obi-Wan and Maul, where you
Hmm.
finally see their conflict come to an end. And I was wondering when this Obi-Wan show was announced what they were going to focus on, and I was like, well, I mean, they could do the Maul Obi-Wan stuff. There's so much there, but they already really kind of wrapped that up in
Ended
Rebels,
it.
and I don't
Yeah.
know that I'd want to see that redone in live action. I mean, it'd be cool, but they've covered it, like
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see anything redone.
exactly because the Rebels is amazing. It's a great great show, and
Hmm.
I highly recommend anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to watch it to watch it.
Yeah.
But that kind of is a natural segue into the show that's coming down the pipeline next, Obi-Wan, here in a few weeks, in time for your new baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be able to hang out with him and
Thank
watch
you,
Obi-Wan.
paternity leave.
Yeah.
I am off for Obi-Wan.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
that'll be amazing. I'm really excited. I mean, Hugh and McGregor is amazing. Did such. I think he's easily one of my favorite parts about the prequels. He brings so much
Yeah.
to the character. He kind of, I think, he defined Obi-Wan for obviously a lot of generations.
Mm.
And
When I think Obi-Wan, I think of Ewan
Ewan,
McGregor. I
yeah,
don't. I
I
don't.
don't think of Alec Guinness. And I think that for older Star Wars fans, that could be sacrilege. But he's just kind of he had more time with the character, obviously, and really made it his
I
own.
think that's what it is. It's not necessarily his portrayal, although I do think it is God level. Yeah, it's the time that he spent with the
Yeah,
character. Yeah.
and I by extension, Obi-Wan in the animated shows is also done really really well.
Yeah.
A different actor, a great voice actor. But I'm excited to see you in return for this show. It's obviously between 3 and 4, maybe I'm going to venture to say 10 years have passed. We see young Luke, and he looks kind of like a 10-year-old in the trailer,
Hmm.
so something like that. And what's cool is to see characters that Filoni kind of characters, Inquisitors and such, that have been in the Clone Wars and in Rebels, mainly for the Inquisitors, Rebels, of course, to see them make their foray into live action. It's going to
Yeah.
be awesome. I mean, like, there's so much that he's added to
Absolutely.
this is essentially the Dave Filoni episode, but there's so much he's added to the lore that's trickling into live action via all of
Yeah.
these shows, even the shows that he might not be directly attached to, like Obi-Wan, and he's his work is finding its way in, and he's really single-handedly kind of changing the course
Yeah.
of Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just reminded me
Yeah.
of a Clone Wars character that we have seen make the leap already from animation to live action, and that is Bo-Katan.
Yeah, Bo-Katan.
same voice actor and everything. I love that they did that.
Yeah, that was a great touch, and she did a great job. I loved her presence in the second season of Mandalorian, and I think for a lot of Clone Wars fans, the biggest is Ahsoka. Right, we saw her in season 2 of the Mandalorian with 2
Also,
white lightsabers, just absolutely chewing up the scenery.
also an upcoming miniseries starring Rosario Dawson and
Yeah.
speaking of Ewan McGregor, his partner, his real life partner, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, will be in
Right.
the new Ahsoka
Oh, that's
series.
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Something to look forward to there.
Yeah.
There's a lot on the horizon. Speaking of that Ahsoka show, she has a big role to play in the Rebels series, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff they do with the Force in that series and the kind of mysticalness behind it, and
Yeah.
kind of in the design of what we've seen of the Ahsoka show and just the title treatment alone. I think they are going to bring in some of that stuff, which I'm excited to see a show in live action explore the depth of the kind of spiritual side
Yeah.
of Star Wars and the Force. So
I,
that'll be
I
interesting.
I hadn't thought about this before we started recording. However, I think it would be remiss to not speak of this kind of general trend in Star Wars from the sequel trilogy on of gray Jedi.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I love it. I mean, the everything that George Lucas did, of course, he loved the strong archetypes. He loved the classic good and evil, black and white, and obviously characters struggle with that in the Jedi Order. Anakin and Ahsoka kind of go through similar journeys where they're like, "This place has stupid ass rules. I don't want to fucking do this."
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome to see characters like Luke in Episode 8, and Ahsoka now, and these shows kind of inhabit that role of being a gray Jedi.
Yeah.
Obviously, she has white lightsabers, kind of purified
Yeah.
Sith crystals, and she's not a Jedi. She doesn't consider herself
Yeah.
one, and that
I
kind of
think
puts her in that camp.
I think Ahsoka was probably the first mainstream gray Jedi. I mean, we've got the first experience I have with a gray Jedi was Jolee Bindo in Knights of the Old Republic,
Awesome,
who
nice.
lives on the surface of Kashyyyk as an exile, a hermit.
Just a quick plug: go listen to Episode 2 of the Holonet, all about our Star Wars video game experiences and thoughts.
But he was the first experience I had with a gray Jedi. Thought it was pretty interesting at the time, but he was very curmudgeonly as a kid.
Yeah.
The older I got, the more unsettling the Jedi Order was to me.
It's
I think,
rigid,
Yeah, I think Ahsoka was the first real acknowledgement of it with everything the Jedi do to her. I think the series does a good job of explaining Anakin's frustrations with it. And then it really, really comes into its own with The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
With Rey ending the Jedi Order and continuing on to do with whatever she's doing. And with Kylo and Rey kind of joining forces and abandoning both sides in a way.
Right. At the end, yeah.
And I think it's a really beautiful thing, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I've always been mostly excited about the older republics, and I can't wait to see what happens after Episode 9 now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some interesting stuff to explore there, and I love that. And we've talked about the trap of making content in a Star Wars timeline where we already know the outcome, and that is something that it's going to be interesting to see these shows deal with. Mandalorian and the rest, a lot of them take place after Episode 6, after Return of the Jedi, before, of course, The Force Awakens. And that's, not a terribly long timeline. I don't know exactly, but maybe, 20, 30 years. And, we obviously, if the sequel trilogy is going to remain canon, which I think we can bet on it doing so, even though there are some rumors, huge grains of salt there, that they might revisit that, though I just don't see that happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got to work in this, and I start to, and I think that's a lot of people think that Moff Gideon, the main antagonist in The Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2, is after Grogu and his blood to have the midichlorians and such to help make clones of Palpatine, and we see those clones in Episode 9.
Yeah.
Some people, of course, had
Or-
issues with some decisions in 9 and 8, and I definitely have my gripes as well, absolutely. But
Yeah.
it'll be interesting. To Star Wars has a history of, Dave Filoni has a history of making Star Wars content that improves the previous, and
Yes.
he could do the same with the sequel trilogy. I mean, obviously, we all wanted the sequel trilogy to be perfect. It wasn't by any means, so maybe he'll be able to come in and add some context.
Well, when you think about a movie on the scale of a Star Wars, on the scale of the Star Wars universe,
Yeah.
an example I like to give for the limitations of film is the Harry Potter series. Each Harry Potter movie, as great as it is essentially a slideshow of events in a Harry Potter book.
Yeah.
I think they're doing what they can with the amount of time they have to demonstrate an entire universe changing.
Yeah. That leads me to an interesting thought. I think that the Star Wars shows are doing as well as they are, largely, of course, because of the creative team behind them. But the format definitely helps, right? They're not working with the stakes of a film, because a lot of that comes with the baggage of producers and suits and all these people that are going to twist and turn it into what they think it needs to be to make money. So they don't have the same kind of profitability margins they have to stress and worry about hitting, and they have 8 hours to tell their story as opposed to two and a half. And I think that for Star Wars, that gives them so much more time to develop new characters and new stories. And I think The Mandalorian in particular is a testament to what they're able to do with this kind of format. And I've got my fingers crossed that Obi-Wan's going to be amazing. I think it will be. And all the future Star Wars shows they've announced, Ahsoka, Acolyte, there's a decent list. I'm fingers crossed that they're just going to keep on killing it. Yeah. Well, Matt, what's the time?
We are about at 43 minutes.
43 minutes.
Do we dare broach into the realm of hatred? Or do we save that for its own episode?
We can do it. Let's talk. Let's give it another 10, 15 for the viewers.
For the viewers.
For the viewers.
So recently there has been no more tumultuous a fandom than the Star Wars fandom. There has been a lot of hate towards any new Star Wars content under the Disney banner.
Yeah.
A lot of that stems from a hatred for a certain Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah. Slightly. I think a lot of people blame Kathleen for perhaps the lack of planning in the sequel trilogy. Fans were shocked that there wasn't, going into that trilogy, especially by Disney, that there wasn't a plan for those three films, that there was not a clear, George Lucas, not the best dialogue writer in the world, but what the man can do is create a really interesting arc and have that in his mind before he sets out to make something. And I think what we saw with the sequel trilogy, why there was so much hate put towards it, was because it felt sloppy because there wasn't a plan, There wasn't this, they didn't go into Episode 7 knowing what was going to happen at the end of Episode 9. And I think that was a missed opportunity, for sure.
Absolutely. It was tonally confused. I will definitely say that about
different directors came in. Obviously, we had Rian Johnson come in for Episode 8, and the plan was to have Colin Trevorrow come in for Episode 9. and that ended up being pivoted back to J.J. Abrams. And J.J. Abrams, I think, did a great job with Episode 7. I was a huge fan of 7.
Yeah, absolutely.
8 was an opinionated movie. It was strong. Obviously, it made a lot of choices that people did not resonate with. And then I think 9 attempted to clean up the mess of 8, but in doing so, lost perhaps being its own film. But to turn this back towards a brighter future, which is what we're currently living in,
Yep.
as divisive as the sequel trilogy was, I think what has brought the Star Wars fans back together is The Mandalorian. I think that show and its vision just, pulled everybody right together.
Absolutely.
It unified the fandom and now has launched this new era of Star Wars media.
Yeah.
All of these new shows coming down the pipeline. And I'm excited.
I think probably the greatest success in Star Wars since the original trilogy. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Obviously, the prequel trilogy has a lot of divisiveness as well. I think the fans going into those movies in the early 2000s and very late 90s were especially the people that had 15 to 25-year-olds that had grown up with the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And had certain expectations for a new Star Wars film, and when they saw Jar Jar Binks, they were like, I'm sorry, what? Even when I was watching those, the entire 1 through 6 with my wife, when we first started dating, we got to episode 1, and Jar Jar Binks runs into frame and runs into Qui-Gon Jinn. I can't remember exactly. And she was like, she paused and was like, who the fuck is this? And I was like, that's probably the most appropriate response to that character.
Yeah.
But
what order did you show them to her, by the way?
I showed 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And that's a whole discussion right there, is what
Yeah,
order do you bring a new Star Wars fan into? But yeah, I mean, obviously the prequels had their issues, and I think that since I'd say The Mandalorian and this kind of new batch of series, aside from probably Boba Fett, have been the strongest Star Wars content to come out in, I mean, 20, 40, 50 years since 1983.
Yeah,
when
I
Return of the
mean,
Jedi came out.
The Mandalorian has its own share of controversy, mostly due to Gina Carano and all of that.
Yeah.
All of that
Which I think
left versus right wing
canceled
stuff. Yeah.
I think they've canceled that show she was supposed to be involved in.
Yeah, supposedly they've actually replaced her character with Mary Elizabeth Winstead as well.
Yes, you mentioned her. Yeah.
But no, I think it has its own fair share of controversy, but it's really genuinely been the most well-received Star Wars content I've seen out there outside of video games and other mediums. But I think tying that back to the beginning of this episode, as if it were planned, I think it's because they created the most original content that they could. They were able to create a sense of belonging with the rest of the series, with the rest of the universe, a sense of continuity by referencing the same reference material and creating something new with it.
Yeah, I think that the sense of kind of classic to Star Wars sense of discovery and wide-eyed amazement at this universe was kind of reignited with The Mandalorian. Seeing sequences as small as him walking into that original cantina and dragging that character out. Just getting to see the nooks and crannies of the Star Wars universe in live action without following a character adjacent to a Skywalker, I think was a huge thing that ignited the love for Star Wars again for a lot of people, and has ushered us into this very new and bright and hopeful era of Star Wars content.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I'm
here for it.
Couldn't be more excited.
Yeah.
I rewatch Mandalorian all the time because there's nothing else that can scratch that itch.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's true
just
Star
have
Wars
to have it.
through and through. Absolutely. And we've got Obi-Wan on the way, and we'll absolutely be doing episodes on that every week. So we're looking forward to it. We hope everyone else is. And here's to the future of Star Wars television.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
I'm Matt.
I'm Ben.
And you've been watching the Holonet.
That's right. Episode 3. Signing off. We'll see you next time.
Sayonara.
Sayonara. May the Force be with you.
Yes.